So this Steve Bannon thing is really important for two reasons. First, it's important because if Steve Bannon is a racist, I want to get it right, and I want to join the crowd of people who's calling for him not to be in the White House. And for the second reason it's important is because the media, the left-wing media, and when I say that, I mean most of the people who are in the media, like New York Times, Washington Post, and so forth, most of the left-leaning media is staking their reputation on the belief that Steve Bannon is a racist. They are forwarding claims from left-wing sources that they haven't checked. And yesterday, my position was, just show me the evidence. I was reading what they were saying, and I was saying, you don't have the evidence. You need more than that if you're going to make the claim that he's a racist, sexist, misogynist, and so forth. Well, last night, I got a little impatient waiting for people to come up with substantive information about him, so I checked some of the things that they said, and let me go through them. So they say that he admitted that he was creating a platform on Breitbart for the alt-right, and I said yesterday, show me what he believed about that. What does he think the alt-right represents? And last night I read Mother Jones in a hit piece that Mother Jones did against him, and there was enough information in there to figure out what he thinks it is. Now, the author of the Mother Jones piece disagrees with him, but he believes that it's not a white nationalist movement. He believes it's a movement of people who are rejecting the traditional establishment conservative positions in society, including, being conservative but being politically correct and being very careful about how you choose your words and all of that. They go over the top. Milo Yiannopoulos is a homosexual, anti-feminist conservative, and he uses rough language, and he doesn't observe any rules of politeness when he debates, and he does it on Breitbart. But so basically, to go back to this point first, alt-right to Steve Bannon does not mean white nationalism. And so I looked at 4 articles that Forbes reporter had. I don't know if she's a reporter or opinion columnist, but four articles that had been mentioned as strong evidence that this is the white nationalist movement. So I looked at them. One of them was Milo Yiannopoulos attacking contraception. Now, he did it in rough language, no question. He said that basically it's going to make you fat and ugly. And then inside of the actual article, there are links to research. I didn't check them out, but links to research that purports to show that, if you take certain kinds of contraception, you're going to gain weight. If you take certain kind of contraception, men will find you less attractive than women who aren't taking it, and so on and so forth. So it's not like it was what it seemed to be on the surface, which was just some kind of freakish attack on women. It was simply an argument that you shouldn't use contraception. You should abstain from sex if you want to. And I think he's Catholic, or if he's not Catholic, he agrees with, Catholic teaching. And I guess that means that people who are saying that article is misogynistic are saying, basically, if you're impolite and you argue against contraception, you are a misogynist. I don't think that flies. One of the other articles was basically centered around, it wasn't actually from Breitbart, but it was from a right-wing or maybe right-leaning school paper, because Yiannopoulos was going to their campus to do a debate with a feminist, and they asked the question of a bunch of students, would you rather your children had feminism or cancer? So again, and it was based on a Twitter poll that Yiannopoulos put out there, I guess. So, yeah, I mean, the implication is that obviously they're saying feminism is bad, and Yiannopoulos believes that feminism is bad. And I checked a poll, and 30% of women say they're not feminists, and a small proportion of women say they are against feminists. So to say that, so again, the premise has to be that if you are against feminism and you're rude about it, you are a misogynist. And again, I don't think that flies. I think feminism has made some claims that maybe should be challenged. Let's put it that way. And one of the other articles was probably the most dangerous looking one, was one about the Confederate battle flag. And this was written by a contributor who used to be who was a Scottish politician, conservative, and he wrote a piece about how terrible and weird and bad it was when the Confederate battle flag was essentially eradicated from our culture because it's a symbol of racism. And his point was to say certain things like, you can still buy a swastika flag on certain websites, but you can't buy the Confederate battle flag anymore. So, and he made some claims about the Civil War and the nationalism that surrounds the Confederate battle flag not being about race, but about tradition and history and independence and so forth. Now, I think you can say clearly that argument is potentially offensive to a lot of people. But is that the same thing? For example, he quotes, Jefferson Davis, I believe, writing a letter to his wife and talking about how bad slavery was. So his point was to say that the Civil War was about states' rights, not a defense of slavery. Now, I don't think that's entirely true. I don't agree with it. But I don't think, and I think certainly that white nationalists would say that, but that doesn't necessarily mean that saying it proves you're a white nationalist. This Scottish politician didn't start with a dog in the fight as far as the tradition of the South, So he wasn't a guy riding around in a pickup truck, a redneck in a pickup truck with a battle flag out the back of his vehicle when he grew up. So, but let's debate about that one. But again, the premise of the article, one of my friends on Facebook said that these articles are unapologetically bigoted. And my point is to say, that's not unapologetically bigoted. He is taking a position that says that being in favor of the Confederate battle flag isn't primarily about race, it's primarily about culture and tradition and history and independence. So again, not an argument that I agree with entirely, but I do see some merit in it. And certainly if someone believed today that the Confederate battle flag does not represent racism, but represents some other thing that's of value to them, it is actually unfair to claim that they are a racist for believing it. That's really my only point. But that's the hardest one to deal with. And again, did Steve Bannon approve that article? We don't have any evidence that he did or didn't. We don't know what he thinks about it. So again, we still don't know that it has anything to do with Steve Bannon's belief. And the last one, which I think is the most interesting, is that that I think it was Yiannopoulos, I'm sure it was Yiannopoulos, published an article which was again stated in a rude way that, women in IT, women who are applying for IT jobs are not being discriminated against, but they just don't interview well. And again, so I read the piece, and it quoted from the people who did a study where they did a blind comparison by altering the voices of people in interviews and playing them back and then getting ratings on how well they interviewed. and they found that the women, when they made their voice sound like men, actually did a little bit. Sorry, I'm trying to remember the details. But let's just go the general point. They basically found that changing the voice of the woman did not make her more likely to be rated high. In other words, it wasn't because she was a woman that she was rated low. And in fact, here's the point I was trying to get at. The men whose voices were changed so they sounded like women actually did better when they sounded like women than they did when they sounded like men. Which means, essentially, if there is a bias, it's a bias toward hiring women and not against hiring women. So that's a study that was done by a feminist who wanted to prove the opposite, but the study didn't prove what she wanted it to prove or expected it to prove. My friends, if it's misogynistic to tell the truth, okay, maybe in a ruder way than you might have had to, then we're at the end, right? You can't have a civil discourse if it is misogynistic or bigoted to tell the truth. So this is dangerous stuff for the media because they've staked their reputation on this, and if you look into the facts and you follow the facts, they just don't have the goods.